what is the role that the Gates Foundation plays with Zika? And maybe you could tell us, what role did you play with Ebola?
Well, I was a little surprised with Ebola. So Ebola happened right after I joined the foundation. And we weren't working in West Africa, and we weren't working on Ebola. But when the outbreak occurred and people got more and more concerned in the summer of 2014, we started getting phone calls. And the phone calls were, this Ebola outbreak needs a rapid, dedicated response, and the Gates Foundation needs to help. And so what we could do uniquely is bring fast, flexible money. We don't have a big national bureaucracy that we have to deal with. So we could rapidly fund the frontline healthcare workers with personal protective gear. We could rapidly fund research and development. We could take high-risk strategies for funding and fund the private sector. So we could do some things uniquely as a foundation, and literally within 48 hours of me assembling the folks I needed to have the discussion, Bill and Melinda committed $50 million to Ebola. So we eventually spent $75 million on supporting R&D, communication, frontline healthcare workers. We supported Nigeria to put up a firewall to the rest of the world, which they very successfully did, which was big in controlling Ebola. And now with Zika, one of the things that is very important for our foundation is engaging with thought leaders on policy for global health security, and we've increasingly been a part of that dialogue. But Zika brings up something the Gates Foundation does that I think people don't often understand. We have a mechanism called Grand Challenges, and Grand Challenges is a specific mechanism to fund high-risk science that others wouldn't fund because it doesn't have a financial reward. So in 2005, we made a grant in Australia to fund a new way to think about mosquito control, what you call vector control in the world of malaria or dengue fever. And this was a project that was a funding for something that seemed crazy in 2005, and the project's called Eliminate Dengue. So the same mosquito transmits dengue and Zika and chikungunya that has also been a big concern. It's the Aedes aegypti mosquito. There's a relatively harmless bacteria called Wolbachia that infects 60% of all insects in the world, but not Aedes mosquitoes. And it turns out that with certain kinds of Wolbachia, if the mosquito is infected with that bacteria, they are less able to transmit viruses. So it's a really brilliant thing. So what these Australian researchers have been doing now for more than a decade, this is really hard to do, is trying to get Wolbachia into these mosquitoes so they can't transmit dengue.
Right.
And turns out they can't transmit Zika either. So this project now has turned into a citizen science project where school children in Australia are putting these Mozzie boxes in their backyard and growing and then releasing female Aedes mosquitoes. It seems contrary. You'd think you'd want to get rid of mosquitoes, right? And they're producing more mosquitoes, but they're producing female mosquitoes that can't transmit Zika. And so this has actually been done at scale in Australia for dengue, and now is being used with some very small but community-based releases of mosquitoes in Brazil and Colombia for Zika as a result of a 2005 investment. That's the kind of thing we want to do on scientific investments that can translate into something that can be used much later to control something like Zika.